First Lady Melania Trump. She held a rare news conference today, speaking decisively as she denied any ties to sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, saying, quote, "The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today."
Numerous fake images and statements about Epstein and me have been circulating on social media for years now. Be cautious about what you believe. These images and stories are completely false. I'm not a witness or a named witness in connection with any of Epstein's crimes. My name has never appeared in court documents, depositions, victim statements, or FBI in interviews surrounding the Epstein matter. I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims.
What's happening? Folks, Adam is here. So what is happening, guys? The theory here is that Melania's surprise Epstein press conference wasn't transparency. It was panic. A former close confidant who spent nearly 2 decades in her orbit is allegedly cooperating with the House Oversight Committee and has publicly declared she has nothing left to lose. If that's true, Melania didn't get ahead of the story. She confirmed there's a story to get ahead of. Look closely at this photograph. On the left, you see Paolo Zampolli. In the center, Donald Trump stands beside a young boy. To the right, Melania Trump poses. And next to them is a woman whose name you need to remember, Amanda Ungaro. For approximately 19 years, Amanda Ungaro was the romantic partner of Paolo Zampolli. The young boy in the center of that photograph is their son together.
Melania Trump walked up to a podium this week and did something no First Lady has ever done. She denied knowing Jeffrey Epstein, unprompted, unscheduled, a surprise press conference, just to say, I was not his victim. I was not his participant.
And recently, at the close of the previous year, Amanda Ungaro was deported by Immigration and Customs Enforcement to Brazil, her country of origin. She had arrived in the United States as a 17-year-old, and the individual responsible for bringing her to American shores was a man named Jean-Luc Brunel. If that name sounds familiar, it should.
Here's where it gets dark. Ungaro says that at 17 years old, she boarded Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, Paris to New York. Her agent, Jean-Luc Brunel, was with her. So were 30 other girls. Beautiful and very young, she told Brazil's O Globo newspaper. I felt immediate discomfort and wanted to get off the plane. I sensed something was wrong, but I did not fully understand the abuse at the time. She doesn't accuse Epstein of assaulting her directly, but she calls herself a product of his machine, the modeling ecosystem he and Brunel built specifically to traffic in young women.
Jean-Luc Brunel was the operational manager of Jeffrey Epstein's international sex trafficking enterprise. He was the scout, the procurer, the man who sourced young women from around the globe and delivered them into Epstein's orbit. Brunel purportedly died by suicide in a French prison cell several years ago, but before his death, he was one of the principal architects of Epstein's predatory network, and he was the man who brought Amanda Ungaro to the United States.
Brunel is dead, Epstein is dead, but Ungaro is very much alive, and she's talking. Fast forward to 2025. Ungaro is arrested in Miami. The charge? Running an alleged unlicensed cosmetic surgery clinic. Botox, procedures, no license. And just like that, she's not just a defendant. She's a detainee. ICE picks her up. She spends more than 3 months in immigration detention. In September 2025, she asks a judge to just deport her. Send me back to Brazil. I'm done. And that should have been the end of it.
Once here, Ungaro became immersed in a very specific social milieu. This was a world where Paolo Zampolli, Donald Trump, and Jeffrey Epstein moved in overlapping circles. They socialized together. They attended the same events. They were part of the same ecosystem of wealth, power, and access. Nearly 2 decades ago, Ungaro met Paolo Zampolli. They began a relationship that would span 19 years and produce a child together. And when Donald Trump ascended to the presidency during his first term, Paolo Zampoli's status within that regime transformed dramatically. He became a figure of considerable influence. Why? Because Zampoli was the man who, in the late 1990s, operated a modeling agency that served as the conduit through which Donald Trump was introduced to Melania. Paolo Zampoli ran an outfit called ID Model Management. His business model involved bringing young women from Eastern Europe, Slovenia in Melania's case, to the United States. He would facilitate their immigration paperwork, assist them in navigating the labyrinthine visa process, and then he would host extravagant parties at a Manhattan venue known as the Kit Kat Club. These were not ordinary social gatherings. These were lavish, decadent affairs featuring exotic animals, lions and tigers, and an atmosphere designed to blur the lines between the fashion industry and the appetites of wealthy, powerful men. It was at one of these Kit Kat Club parties where Zampoli allegedly introduced a young Slovenian model named Melania Knaus to a real estate mogul named Donald Trump. The exact date is sometimes disputed, but the essential fact remains. Zampoli was the matchmaker. He also assisted Melania in obtaining what is colloquially known as an Einstein visa, an expedited pathway for individuals with extraordinary ability. She met Trump. The relationship flourished. She married him. She subsequently utilized the family reunification provisions of immigration law, the very process that MAGA Republicans derisively label chain migration, to bring her own parents to the United States. The rest, as they say, is history. Now, during all of this time, Paolo Zampoli was in a long-term relationship with Amanda Ungaro, and because of Zampoli's proximity to power, Ungaro was afforded a front-row seat to the Trump universe. She and Zampoli were invited to the exclusive events. They spent time at Mar-a-Lago. They appeared in countless photographs alongside the Trumps and their associates. In fact, Amanda Ungaro was even designated as a ceremonial ambassador to Grenada for a brief period, an honorary title bestowed upon her by the Trump administration, and Paolo Zampoli himself currently holds an official position with an ambassador's rank, serving as a special envoy for American partnerships. He travels the globe on the taxpayer's dime, most recently appearing in Hungary alongside J.D. Vance to bolster the regime of Viktor Orban. He functions essentially as the social chairman and liaison for the Trump network, a reward, it would seem, for his decades of loyalty and his role in facilitating that fateful introduction at the Kit Kat Club. His name appears repeatedly throughout the Epstein files. When questioned by the press about this, Zampoli offered a remarkably tone-deaf response. He suggested that it was actually a positive sign to be listed in the Epstein documents because it demonstrated that one was influential and part of the in crowd. No, Mr. Zampoli, that is not what it demonstrates. But let's connect these threads directly to Melania. Melania arrived from Slovenia. Ungaro arrived from Brazil. They navigated similar social spheres. Zampoli was deeply embedded with the Trumps. Ungaro was, by all appearances, close to Melania. She was present for family milestones. She received birthday calls from Melania's Secret Service detail. She was, for all intents and purposes, part of the inner circle. And because Zampoli and Ungaro never formalized their union through marriage, a critical legal distinction exists. Under American law, spouses possess a marital privilege that generally prevents one from being compelled to testify against the other. But Zampoli and Ungaro were never husband and wife. No such privilege attaches to their communications. Whatever Zampoli may have confided to Ungaro during their 19 years together, about Melania, about Donald, about Epstein, about the nature of the gatherings at Mar-a-Lago, Ungaro is legally free to disclose, and it appears that is precisely what has been happening. Information has emerged suggesting that Amanda Ungaro has been voluntarily cooperating with Democratic members of the House Oversight Committee. She has been sharing what she knows, and what she knows appears to be substantial. Why would she talk? The answer lies in a bitter, life-altering betrayal. Ungaro and Zampoli are no longer together. They separated, and a custody dispute over their son ensued. She subsequently remarried a physician in Miami. But according to a recent investigative report in the New York Times, Paolo Zampolli, and he denies this allegation, though the Trump orbit has a well-documented relationship with the truth, contacted Immigration and Customs Enforcement and actively sought their assistance in deporting his ex-girlfriend, Amanda Ungaro. The objective, according to the reporting, was to remove her from the country so that he could retain sole custody of their child, and the Trump administration's ICE apparatus complied. She was detained. She was placed in deportation proceedings, and she was ultimately sent back to Brazil. Her son was effectively taken from her. Her life in the United States, the life she had built over 2 decades, was dismantled. And now, she is a woman with nothing left to lose. As she has stated publicly, her existence has been ripped away. And she is no longer afraid. She is angry, and she possesses information, and this brings us to the deportation itself. One must wonder, was the custody dispute the sole motivation for Ungaro's removal from the country, or was there an additional, more sinister layer to the decision? Was she deported not just to give Zampoli leverage in family court, but also to silence a potential witness who knew too much? A woman who had spent 2 decades in the innermost sanctum of the Trump social circle, who had observed the comings and goings at Mar-a-Lago, who had heard the whispered conversations and witnessed the interactions between Trump, Epstein, and their associates. Sending her to Brazil certainly made it more difficult for congressional investigators to access her, but it did not make it impossible. And based on her public statements, it did not make her any less willing to talk. In fact, it seems to have had the opposite effect. Now, consider Melania's recent press conference through this lens. She stood before the cameras and declared that everyone is lying. She claimed she had no connection to Epstein. She insisted there are no documents, no photographs, nothing authentic linking her to that world. Everything, according to Melania, is fake. Do not believe what you see. Do not believe what you read. But we have the receipts. We have the emails. We have the correspondence between Melania and Ghislaine Maxwell. In one exchange, Melania writes to Maxwell, calling her G, and praises a New York Magazine article. She tells Maxwell that she looked great in the photos and that Jeffrey came across wonderfully. She suggests they should get together soon. The New York Magazine article in question was the infamous profile where Donald Trump described Jeffrey Epstein as a terrific guy who enjoyed the company of beautiful women on the younger side. That was the article Melania was complimenting, and Ghislaine Maxwell responded, addressing Melania as Sweet Pea, and thanked her for the kind words. They had pet names for each other. But now, according to Melania, all of this is fabricated. The emails are fake. The photographs are manipulated. The documented history is a lie. And then, in a maneuver of staggering audacity, Melania used her press conference to demand that Congress hold hearings and compel the testimony of Epstein's survivors. She wanted the victims, the women who were trafficked and abused, to be paraded before the cameras and forced to relive their trauma once again. She explicitly clarified that she herself was not a victim. "I am not a survivor," she stated. But she wanted the actual survivors to testify. The response from those survivors was immediate and visceral. They asked why Melania was attempting to re-traumatize them. They pointed out that they have already told their stories, that they have already fought for justice in the face of a system that protected their abusers. They demanded to know why Melania wasn't calling for the testimony of people like Howard Lutnick, or the members of Trump's own cabinet, or Donald Trump himself. Why place the burden on the victims? Why not call in the perpetrators? Why not subpoena the members of the cabal? And then, in the immediate aftermath of Melania's bizarre press conference, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Paolo Zampolli suddenly announced that he wanted to be deposed. He wanted to set the record straight. He wanted to clarify for the historical record that it was he, not Jeffrey Epstein, who introduced Donald Trump to Melania. He wanted credit for the introduction at the Kit Kat Club. But Zampoli's eagerness to insert himself into the narrative raises a host of uncomfortable questions. Does he not realize that admitting to being the conduit for Melania's entry into Trump's world opens him up to a whole new line of inquiry? What exactly was the nature of his modeling agency? What was the arrangement with the young Eastern European women he brought to America? What happened at those Kit Kat club parties? And what would a competent cross-examination reveal about Melania's immigration status and the circumstances under which she obtained that Einstein visa? Zampoli seems to believe he is controlling the narrative. In reality, he may be walking directly into a trap of his own making. And this is where the pieces all converge. Melania's press conference was not a random act. It was a preemptive strike. It was damage control. Because Amanda Ungaro, the woman who spent 20 years in Melania's orbit, the woman who was deported to Brazil, the woman who lost her child and her life in America, has been talking, and Melania knows it. Look at what Amanda Ungaro has posted publicly. She addresses Melania directly. She reminds her that she was present in her life for 2 decades. She points out that Melania knew she was in ICE detention and did nothing. She recalls how Melania would send Secret Service agents to wish her son a happy birthday. She accuses Melania of trying to involve her in something sinister involving children, and failing because Ungaro refused to be compromised. And then she delivers the threat that must be keeping Melania awake at night. Ungaro states that she has nothing left to lose. She vows to expose everything she knows. She promises to tear down the entire corrupt system, even if it's the last thing she does. She warns Melania to be careful. She declares that she is not afraid, and she suggests that perhaps Melania should be the one who is afraid of what she knows about her and her pedophile husband. She threatens legal action. She reminds the world that she has known Melania for 20 years and was present for every birthday, every event, every milestone. This is the witness Melania fears most. This is the woman who was inside the bubble. This is the confidant who saw the unvarnished reality behind the carefully curated public image. And Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are undoubtedly aware of what Amanda Ungaro knows. In my assessment, it is highly likely that Ungaro was already in communication with congressional investigators. Melania caught wind of this cooperation. She panicked. She orchestrated Zampoli's sudden willingness to be deposed as a distraction. And then she held that press conference to preemptively discredit whatever Ungaro might reveal. She essentially told the American people, do not believe the woman who was deported to Brazil. Disregard her as a disgruntled ex with an axe to grind. But look at the source, Melania. Look at who this woman actually is. She was your friend. Your husband made her a ceremonial ambassador. You attended parties together. There are mountains of photographic evidence documenting your closeness over a period of many years. You cannot simply erase her from the narrative, and this is where the story stands. Amanda Ungaro may hold the keys to unlocking secrets that Melania and her husband have spent years trying to bury. Paolo Zampolli may have unwittingly opened a door that cannot be closed. And if a deposition of Amanda Ungaro ever takes place, if she is ever given a formal platform to detail what she witnessed during her 2 decades inside the Trump orbit, the revelations could be catastrophic. She has stated plainly that she has nothing left to lose. That is the most dangerous kind of witness. That is the kind of witness who burns everything down. And Melania's dark past, the past she has tried so desperately to obscure, is now surfacing from the one person she likely feared would eventually speak. The clock, as I said, is running out, and there is nothing Melania can do to stop it. Let's examine more closely the specific allegations and connections that make this story so explosive. The relationship between Paolo Zampolli and Amanda Ungaro is not merely a footnote in the social history of the Trump era. It is a direct pipeline into the inner workings of a network that connected the worlds of modeling, real estate, politics, and the Epstein enterprise. Zampoli's ID Model Management Agency was the vehicle through which young European women were brought into the United States. The parties at the Kit Kat Club were the venues where these women were introduced to wealthy, powerful American men. And Melania Trump was one of the women who emerged from that very system. She met her future husband through this network. She benefited from the immigration facilitation that Zampoli's operation provided. And she maintained a close ongoing relationship with Zampoli and, by extension, with Ungaro for decades thereafter. Ungaro's own journey to the United States is equally troubling. Brought to America as a 17-year-old by Jean-Luc Brunel, one of Epstein's most notorious recruiters, she was thrust into a world where the exploitation of young women was not an aberration, but a business model. She managed to build a life for herself. She became a mother. She navigated the treacherous social currents of the Trump orbit. And she observed, she listened, she remembered. And now, stripped of her life in America by the very immigration enforcement apparatus controlled by the man whose inner circle she once inhabited, she is speaking out. The irony is almost too bitter to comprehend. The Trump administration, which built its political identity on the demonization of immigrants, used its power to deport a woman who was intimately familiar with the immigration irregularities and social dynamics of the First Lady herself. Melania's press conference was a study in controlled panic. She attempted to project an image of dignified concern for victims while simultaneously distancing herself from any personal knowledge of the criminal enterprise that victimized them. She demanded that Congress hear from survivors while refusing to acknowledge her own documented communications with Ghislaine Maxwell. She claimed everything was fake, while evidence of her participation in this social circle is a matter of public record. And she did all of this in the shadow of Amanda Ungaro's threats to expose everything. The survivors of Epstein's trafficking network have responded with justified outrage. They have spent years fighting to be heard, fighting against a system that protected powerful men at their expense. They have testified. They have provided evidence. They have endured the scrutiny and skepticism of a world that often prefers to look away. And now the First Lady of the United States is invoking their trauma as a political prop, demanding they relive their nightmares so that she can appear to be on the side of justice while protecting her own husband from similar scrutiny. The survivors are correct. The focus should not be on re-traumatizing victims. The focus should be on questioning the perpetrators. Call Howard Lutnick. Call the members of the cabinet. Call Donald Trump himself. And call the people who facilitated the introductions, who managed the social calendar, who knew where the bodies were buried. Call Paolo Zampolli. And call Amanda Ungaro. Zampoli's sudden eagerness to be deposed is a fascinating development. He seems to believe that clarifying the details of the Trump-Melania introduction will somehow exonerate him or improve his standing. But depositions are unpredictable things. A skilled questioner can take a witness down paths they never anticipated. Imagine the lines of inquiry that would open up if Zampoli were placed under oath. When exactly did you meet Melania? What were the circumstances of her arrival in the United States? What assistance did you provide with her visa application? What was the nature of the parties at the Kit Kat Club? Who attended these parties? What was your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein? How often did you see him at Mar-a-Lago? What did you discuss with Amanda Ungaro about Melania and Donald? Zampoli may believe he is controlling the narrative. He may soon discover that he has opened Pandora's box, and Amanda Ungaro's words hang over all of this like a storm cloud ready to burst. She has declared that she will tear down the entire corrupt system. She has stated that she is not afraid. She has directly accused Melania of trying to involve her in something related to children. These are not idle threats from a disgruntled ex-girlfriend. These are the declarations of a woman who has been pushed to the edge, who has lost everything, and who possesses knowledge that powerful people desperately want to keep buried. She was inside the room. She attended the birthday parties. She received the calls from the Secret Service. She knows who Melania Trump really is, and she has made it clear that she intends to share that knowledge with the world. So, where does this leave us? The press conference was a defensive maneuver. The Zampoli deposition offer was a diversion. The attacks on Ungaro's credibility are a preemptive strike, but the truth has a way of surfacing, especially when the person holding it has nothing left to lose. Amanda Ungaro is that person. She is the witness Melania feared most. And now her dark past is surfacing for all to see. The clock is ticking, Melania, and there is no place left to hide.